Hello guys and welcome back to another episode. So today we're going to talk about Frost Mage. So this guide is going to be about Frost Mage in patch 8.1, and we are going through the stats, the Azerite traits, the talents and the gameplay of the Frost Mage. So welcome to my PvE guide for Frost Mages, and in this guide I will make sure that you will be comfortable playing Frost Mage. Keep in mind this is not a pro guide, so I will not be teaching you to how to be like a method raider or something like that. I'm learning you the basic steps of being a Frost Mage to, you could say, maximizing it. So I will learn you all the core principles of Frost Mage, and from there on it's your step to go up here. But I will learn you all the basics so you cannot fail and go under that. So the first thing again is the stats, so let's just go directly to it. So your stats. First of all, you need intellect. Intellect will be on all your pieces of gear except trinkets. Trinkets can be random, but if you get a trinket with intellect or critical strike, you would always take the one with intellect, because your primary stat is the best one for you. It increases your damage and overall your abilities. So intellect is always the best one. Of course, if the trinket with critical strike is higher eye level, 5 eye level is to discuss, probably simit, but 10 eye level over, you probably then you take the one with critical strike. But primary you should always try to get with the highest eye level because of intellect. But again, if you get an item that is 10 eye level, let's for example say you get an item that has intellect, a trinket with intellect and a trinket with critical strike, but the intellect trinket is only 340 and the critical one is 355. Then you would take the one with critical strike. Even though it's number 2 stat, you still need it because the eye level is still a bit more, so in that eye level scale you should take the one with the highest eye level. But enough about that. So first of all, your first stat is intellect. Number 2 is critical strike. And yeah, that is actually a, you can say, a proc for where critical strike is only efficiency. So critical strike should only go up to 33%. And when you go to 33%, it will be the maximize of your critical strike. You can still get more critical strike and still have more efficiency of it, but critical strike is pretty much good as it is on 33, because also your passive spell called Shatter. So Shatter is multiplying your critical strike on freeze target with 1.5. It will multiply with 1.5 with your critical strike chance on percent. So critical strike you should always go up to 33, and after 33 then you should focus on haste. And haste decreases the cast time of your spells, it lowers your global cooldown, it reduces the cooldown of your blizzard, and it also increases the cast speed of your water elemental and mirror images. So first of all, intellect, critical strike to 33, and then haste. Versatility because of your flat damage. Versatility basically just increase your flat damage and the damage you take will be reduced, so it's okay. The last one you would take is mastery. Mastery is just making your ice cycle stronger, so every time you cast a frost ball you will create a little ice thing that will fly around you, and every time you get up to 5 stacks it will fire the oldest one and attack, and it basically just increases that damage for your mastery. After that it's critical strike again, because let's say you get an item where you pretty much have, you can say, intellect, create, haste, but still the mastery, well then it's just for telling you that it's okay to get still more critical strike, but after 33% you don't really need critical strike, and it's like the at least needed one, but it's still okay to get a critical strike. It's not like, nope, this is a wall, you will not get anything out of it. It's just, it's not recommended, but you can still do it. But this is the stats I'm highly recommending. So that was the stats first of all. So I hope you understood the stats and which, you can say, the importance of intellect and critical strike is for Frost Mages for your primary damage. For the next step we're going through the Azerite traits. So we will start with the outer ring of your Azerite traits. So primarily, always I would say Flash Freeze is the best one. The bonus damage you get from your ice cycles, I really don't care about that one, but when an ice cycle deals damage, you have 5% chance to get Fingers of Frost effect. That is pretty cool, because for example, you have 5 stacks of ice cycles, you use ice lance, it will fire all 5 ice cycles to attack. That means it's 25% to get Fingers of Frost. This is awesome. So Flash Freeze is 100% the Azerite trait in Outer Ring I will recommend for Frost Mages. Number 2 is Treasure's Covenant. I mean, which guide for patch 8.1 haven't I said Treasure's Covenant? Everyone can almost use this one here, it's so overpowered. Your primary status increased by 150, it will of course scale depending on eye level. When you're above 50% health, it's so amazing that you deal more damage when you're over 50% health, but it has a little downside. When you're below 20% health, you take 15% increased damage. So that's how it is. The last one I recommend, I mean, after Flash Freeze and Treasure's Covenant, I really don't care personally which trait you're going to take, but if you look on the paper which one is dealing the most damage after these two, it's Dagger in the Back. And Dagger in the Back is basically a spell that deals what's it called, physical bleed damage, and depending on your spell, so it will deal damage and stack up and deal damage. But again, Flash Freeze and Treasure's Covenant is the most important, and Dagger in the Back on the paper is number 3 best, so that's how it is. And now the middle ring. So the first one I'm recommending is Overwhelming Power. So Overwhelming Power is giving you a lot of haste, and as you remember maybe on our stats, if I just quickly go back, you can see Intellect, Crit, Haste. So haste is like the number 3, you can say stat. Secondary stats it's number 2. But Overwhelming Power will give you a lot of haste, and it will help you in your damage, so it's really good. After Overwhelming Power, I'm recommending Heed My Call and God Ripper. Heed My Call is the best one in, you can say, dungeons and multiple target, and God Ripper is the best one on a boss fight where you have like an execute phase. But again, it's up to you if you want to have Heed My Call or God Ripper. Both are really good, but Heed My Call is probably the best one for dungeons and trash mobs, and God Ripper is the best one for single target and boss fights. So those are the middle ring traits I will recommend. So that was the stats, the Azerite traits, and the next part we're going to the talents, so I will just quickly switch over to my game screen. And here we are. So here we have the talent screen, and let's go to the talents. So I will be going through each talent row and explain which talent you should choose for which scenario, and which talent I'm recommending for, you can say, pretty much every time in the game. So let's start with the first row. So the first row is a kind of preparation. Do you like to play with a pet or not? Bone chilling is the most seen and common, and I would say the easiest talent to play with. So whenever you attempt to chill a target, you gain bone chilling, increasing the spell damage you deal by 0.5 for 8 seconds, and it stacks up to 10 times. So bone chilling, I would personally say it's probably the best and easiest to hold up the damage, because while you have bone chilling, you can still have your pet that deals damage, and you have the awesome ability called Freeze, where you can freeze the enemies and use your passive spell Shatter to deal more critical strike damage. But if you don't like your pet, you can also take Lowly Winter. These two spells are so close in damage, so it doesn't really matter if you're taking Bone Chilling or Lonely Winter. But I will still say Bone Chilling is my favorite one and the one I recommend. For the next row, it's really up to you. This is just survival, so take whatever you want. Personally, I like to play with Shimmer, but just take whichever you need. On the third row, Incanter's Flow is the best one in all situations. Don't think about these two, just go Incanta's Flow and you will be okay. Just take Incanta's Flow no matter what. On the next row we have Frozen Touch and Even Bolt. Frozen Touch and Even Bolt, quite funny, but again they are so close on the same damage. So you should pick the one that is best with your playstyle. Do you want a passive spell so you don't have an additional spell you have to use, or do you like to have an Even Bolt that kind of give you the control of you can control when you want a brain freeze, or you want to have this one here that will RNG help you getting more very brain freezes. So Frozen Touch, just to tell you, Frostbolt grant Fingers of Frost and brain freeze 20% more often. An Even Bolt deals a lot of damage and it grants you directly brain freeze. So you could say this one here is damage directly and it gives you brain freeze, but this one here gives you Fingers of Frost and brain freeze 20% more often. But Frozen Touch and Even Bolt are so close, so I would say pick the one that is for your game style. So that one is up to you. The next row here, again, this is just for crowd control. So if you want to have a Ring of Frost or Frost Nova has 2 charges, that is pretty much up to you. I don't care about this row. The next row, we have all these 3, and all these 3 are actually quite okay. So Freezing Rain is the best one where you have constant AoE damage. So like +4 mobs and so on. Freezing Rain is the best one you could probably say for trash mobs and a lot of trash mobs. So AoE, AoE, AoE all the time. If you're using this talent, you should also use Blizzard in single target fights, because when you use Frozen Orb, Blizzard is instant cast and it increases damage by 50. So if you have Freezing Rain because you want to deal more damage on trash mobs, you should also use this proc with Blizzard on single target. Splitting Ice is the best talent no matter what on 2 targets. So every time there's 2 targets cleave, so if you go into a raid where there's 2 bosses that is going to hug each other, then Splitting Ice is the best one in all situations. It's the best 2 targets cleave spell. Comet Storm is the best one for single target, so you can say you have 1 single target solid one, you have a 2 target, and you have a +4 target. So again, it's up to you which scenarios you're going into, but if I'm going into a raid where I'm more focused on just dealing single target damage to the tank, sorry, not the tank, the boss, I would go with Comet Storm. Yep. And the last row. So again, all these 3 spells here are quite good and works quite well. Thermal Void is for the person who don't want an additional spell or change how the rotation is played. It's really good. It's not, you can say these 2 spells are like 100% good, but this one here is like 80-90% good. But again, it doesn't change your rotation, it just makes your life easier. So if you like to have easy life, you could go with passive and you would be good. But if you want a performance 100%, I would say Glacial Spike is probably one of those who deals a lot of damage. But it's very important when you use Glacial Spike, you should always use it together with Brain Freeze, because Brain Freeze is applying Shatter. So what I mean is that Brain Freeze is you're dealing the same damage to the target as he was frozen, and if he's frozen, Shatter will come from and multiplies the critical strike of your spells against frozen targets by 1.5 and adds an additional 50 critical strike chance. So you can see that Glacial Spike is someone you always want to use together with Brain Freeze. For example, if you're having Even Bolt, you can use Even Bolt and then you have 100% chance to get Brain Freeze, and then you could use Glacial Spike. So these 2 together would be a pretty cool burst combo. Also, on 2 target trash, Splitting Ice is also making your Even Bolt and Glacial Spike hitting 2 targets. That means if you take Splitting Ice, both Even Bolt and Glacial Spike will now also hit an additional target. So really great, and you don't need to think about Brain Freeze then. If there's 2 targets, you just want to use Glacial Spike and Even Bolt as many times as you can. Just boom boom. So, but Ray of Frost is also a really great talent. It deals a lot of damage, but I'm not sure if I would say it's better than Glacial Spike. It's a great, easy, you click on a cooldown, boom, and he deals a lot of damage over 5 seconds and you can just stand and wait. But I would probably say Glacial Spike is better. So for single target build, I would probably myself go with this build here you can see right now. On Cleave, 2 targets, I would go with Splitting Ice and wrist looking like this. And on, you can say, Trash Mobs, I would go with Freezing Rain and probably stay the same. Maybe take a Frozen Touch with Trash Mobs instead of Even Bolt, but it can be discussed. But let's just take the single target build here. Yeah. So this is the talents I'm recommending and for different scenarios. I hope this was helpful in some kind of a way and help you. So the next thing would be gameplay, and we go into the dummies now, and I will show you the rotation and how you should play Frost Mage and which I would recommend for being your opener and rotation. Okay, here we are at the dummies. So I will go through the opener and the rotation, how you should play as a Frost Mage. So Frost Mage is not just like any other casters where you just have to follow a simply rotation. You actually have some spells and you could say different scenarios where you have to proc up and use spells in an important row. So let's go through it. So first of all, I will mention the opener on how you should open on different bosses. So for example, let's say we have a tank, he's going to pull now and open up. The first thing you always will do is, while you can see he's running toward the boss, you want to cast a Frostball at the same time. So when he's running toward the boss and beginning to charge, you have a Frostball ready, and the Frostball is hitting exactly the same time as he's attacking the target. I would say that is very important. So always for your opener, have a Frostball ready and cast it together with the tank is charging up. So the next pass after that is you want to use your Icy Veins. So for 20 seconds now you have 30% haste, and you cannot be prevented damaging delaying on your spell cast. So first of all, you see the tank running toward the boss, you use Frostball at the same time the tank is running. Then you use Icy Veins to get 30% more haste for 20 seconds. The next after that you will want to use Frozen Orb, Comet Storm, and now use all your Fingers of Frost on Ice Lands. That is like your opener. After that you just have to follow your normal rotation. So again, Frostball before he pulls, Icy Veins, Frozen Orb and Comet Storm. And your Frozen Orb is probably generating 2 Fingers of Frost for you. That means you have to use 2 times Ice Lands and it will deal a lot of more damage. So again, Frostball, Icy Veins, Frozen Orb, Comet Storm, and probably Ice Lands 2 times for using your Fingers of Frost. That is your opener. Then now it's back to your normal rotation. What should you do after that? What is your normal rotation as a Frost Mage? So first of all, it's very different how your opener is, your rotation, but I'm playing with Glacial Spike that I pretty much feel like is the best talent. So I will learn you how to play with the Glacial Spike. So first of all, we have some core principles we need to understand. Shatter, we deal more damage to frozen targets. Our critical strike is insanely stronger against frozen target. Frozen target can either be if you just freeze them like this, so this is now a frozen target, or if you have your pet, where is my pet? If you have your pet and he use freeze, oh, of course, the bosses are always even, but again, it's if you freeze a target, like normal mobs, but bosses cannot be freezed. That's why you have brain freeze. So when you use flurry, brain freeze makes your flurry instant cast, deals more damage, and it makes in those 3 seconds. How long is it? It's 3 seconds where you basically are attacking with flurry instant cast. In those 3 seconds, brain freeze will apply Winter's Chill to the target. Winter's Chill will do the effect on the target so it thinks it's frozen, and that's where your shatter works. So for example, let me make shatter, let me do flurry. Let me see if I can get a proper frozen brain freeze. Oh wait, I can just use my Ebon Bolt. So now you can see I have a brain freeze. So now look very carefully. Now I use flurry. You can see it has a debuff now. Approximately, that was probably 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, maybe it's only 1, but 1 to 2 seconds, all the damage you deal in those 2 seconds will be frost damage. So that means, for example, my glacial spike I have from my best talents, it needs to be used first. I will use glacial spike, and then I will use my instant cast flurry, because glacial spike is slow to attack like frostball. So flurry will go directly up, dealing damage, and makes the target like it's frozen. And then you have to use then glacial spike will hit in that time, and it will now deal damage as frozen. So for example, let me show you. I know it can be complicated, but we will get through this. So again, let me get up 5 stacks. Okay, that's lucky, I got a brain freeze now. So now let me show you here. Now I have glacial spike. Never use glacial spike, just you have to have a brain freeze. So now use glacial spike and flurry. As you can see, glacial spike critted, just boom, critted, and dealt a lot of damage because I used brain freeze on the same time. So first you use your glacial spike and then flurry. It's very important you should, so every time you use your glacial spike, you should always have a flurry ready with, what was it called again? Brain freeze. Because if I just use my glacial spike without having a brain freeze, now I got brain freeze again, so that's pretty lucky. But you can see if I just use my brain freeze now, glacial spike now, it's just boom, 30k damage. That's literally nothing. But if I use it together with my flurry, so let me show you here. Okay, ready again, cast it, and brain freeze. Boom, 68k crit. So you can see our brain freeze is so important. So for example, after you have used your opener, there's a frostball, frostball, ice veins, frozen orb, comet storm, and then spam a lot of times ice lance. Then your rotation will pretty much be that you use frozen ball as a filler. Just use it as a filler all the time. Now you can see I have 5 stacks of my ice cycles that I get from my mastery. We don't use glacial spike then, because then it will get wasted and it will probably not crit. We first want to use glacial spike when we actually have a brain freeze. So that's when you can see now I wasn't lucky, I didn't get any brain freezes. Then I can use an even bolt and get a 100% brain freeze now. Now I have a brain freeze. So that means now we can cast glacial spike and then flurry. So it 100% critical strike. Also, just to add additional damage into your rotation, every time you use Flurry, it's very important you cast the Ice Lance after it, because then it deals damage to triple of its damage, because Ice Lance damage is tripled against frozen targets. So that means you use Glacial Spike, Flurry, and Ice Lance. Boom. Let's try that again. So let's get up 5 stacks. Okay, Ray, Glacial Spike, Flurry, and Ice Lance. Boom. That is heavy damage on demand. For example, so we're getting up again the stacks. Let's get up the stacks. 5 Ice Cycles. Boom. Boom. And one more, come on. Here we go. So now I have a Brain Freeze and a Glacial Spike. So Glacial Spike, Flurry, and Ice Lance. Boom. That is damage. And the cool thing about having Ebon Bolt is, if you're not that lucky to actually have a Brain Freeze, let's get up to 5 stacks again. So remove my Brain Freeze. Oh no, now I don't have a Brain Freeze. What am I going to do? I have a Glacial Spike ready. Well, the cool thing now is that I can basically just use Ebon Bolt, Glacial Spike, and now Brain Freeze, and Ice Lance. Because Ebon Bolt is giving me 100% Brain Freeze. So that means it's great, because now I can on demand just pick up when I actually want to deal a lot of damage. So again, the opener is Frostball, Icy Veins, Frozen Orb, Comet Storm, and spam 2 times Ice Lance because of Fingers Frost. And then back to your normal rotation, where pretty much you just have to use Frostball all the time. Every time you just have to use Frostball all the time. Get up your 5 stacks. Use your Glacial Spike, but only when you have a Brain Freeze. Only when having a Brain Freeze ready. Now I didn't have one, so that's why I'm using Ebon Bolt, Glacial Spike, Flurry, and Ice Lance. Now you can see I have additional Brain Freeze. That means I will use Frostball and Flurry, because then my Frostball will use the same effect from my Flurry like my Glacial Spike. So normally you would say save your Brain Freeze for your Glacial Spike, but the problem was it was only 6 seconds back, so I would never be able to use Glacial Spike for that next 6 seconds. So that's why I'm using Frostball and then Flurry with my Brain Freeze, because it will also affect my other spells. So you could say you always want to use your Brain Freeze after Glacial Spike, fast after Glacial Spike, or fast after Frostball, but mostly Glacial Spike if it's ready. Just a note, every time Frozen Orb or Comet Storm is ready, use it. Use it. Every time Comet Storm and Frozen Orb are ready. So while you're doing your normal rotation, just trying to get up your 5 stacks using Brain Freeze and using your spells, every time Comet Storm and Frozen Orb or Icy Veins are ready, use them. Just pull them out and use them. The last thing I haven't talked about is Fingers of Frost. So every time you use a Frostball, there's a 15% chance that you get a stack of Finger of Frost. And what it does is basically it makes your Ice Lance to deal the same damage on your target as it was frozen. Now you can see we have it. So here it is. Your next Ice Lance deal damage as target were frozen. So you can see here, boom, 11k, boom, 11k. Normal damage, 2k. So you can see the point. So every time you can say, every time your Ice Lance is marking I'm ready for being used, use it, but don't use Flurry every time it shows it's ready, because you want to use Flurry to get up a Glacial Spike or Frostball. Very important. And every time you use Flurry with Brain Freeze, it's very important you use Ice Lance after that. So again, let me show you here what we can do. Okay, so Ebon Bolt, Glacial Spike, Flurry, Ice Lance. And now I have one more Brain Freeze, so Frost Ball, Flurry, Ice Lance. So you can say the rotation from Frost Mage is very based on getting your spells together and use it in one blast. So you're kind of taking all the power and throwing it in one blast. Very important. So it's not like use this, use this, use this, use this. It's very much like you have to assemble your powers and use them in one big poof. Poof. Very important. But again, use Comet Storm every time you can, use Frozen Orb every time you can, and use your Fingers of Frost you're actually getting from your Frozen Orb. So I would say this is pretty much the rotation for when playing as a Frost Mage with Glacial Spike also. You could say without playing with Glacial Spike, for example, if let's go in here. So let's remove Glacial Spike. Boom, boom, boom. So you could say now without having Glacial Spike, the rotation is actually quite close, but not 100%. Because now when you use Frost Ball, you will still generate these ice cycles, but every time you get up on 5 stacks, it will begin to fire them off. You can see now, it will begin to shoot them. Boom, shoot, boom, shoot. And it actually deals the same damage as your Frost Ball. So you can see I'm dealing 2 times Frost Ball damage now. It's actually more funny to, I would say more funny to see this, because it's just dealing more damage passively. But the only changes is that now you don't have to wait up for 5 stacks, because it will passively do whatever it wants. Also, if you use Ice Lance, it will fire off all the ices. But now you don't care about your ice cycles, they are pretty much just fitting themselves. The only thing you want to do now is you have to watch out for the Brain Freezes and Fingers of Frost. So now I got a Brain Freeze. So probably what I will be doing is I would use an Even Bolt and then Flurry. So before we only use Glacial Spike and then Flurry with our Brain Freeze. But now I'm going to use it together with either Frost Ball or Even Bolt, depending on which spell is ready. So now my Brain Freeze is ready again, but I don't just use it, just don't do this. This will be such a waste. You have to use some kind of a cast spell before you're using your Brain Freeze on Flurry. So again, let's go back here. Let's see here. Okay, so now I have Brain Freeze ready on my Flurry. That means I will be using Ebon Bolt and then Flurry and Ice Lance. Now I have one more Brain Freeze from Ebon Bolt, then I would use Frost Ball, Flurry and Ice Lance. And then back to the normal rotation, just spamming Frost Ball, Flurry, Ice Lance. So only use, I have it again, only use Brain Freeze every time you either cast Frost Ball before or Ebon Bolt. And if you don't have talented Ebon Bolt and you have Frozen Touch, that makes your rotation even easier. So let's go in here, let's take Frozen Touch. Has to wait for cooldown. Now your rotation cannot be easier than this. So now your Frozen Fingers of Frost and Brain Freeze is 20% more often, and you have, you can say, a longer icy veins. So now your rotation is pretty much you only use Flurry with Brain Freeze before, after a Frost Ball, and every time you use Brain Freeze with Flurry, you always use Ice Lance after that. So let's try it. So now the rotation is just, see here, now the rotation is just Frost Ball, Flurry, Icelands, Frostball, Flurry, Icelands, Frostball, Flurry, Icelands. So as you can see, this is now the most easy rotation in the world, because I basically just have to spam Frostball. Every time my Brain Freeze is ready, I use Flurry, but only use Flurry just after you cast a Frostball. So Frostball will, you can imagine that Frostball is flying against the target, and Flurry is just quickly hitting the target before Frostball, and then it deals frost damage. And you always use one Icelands after Flurry with your Brain Freeze, because then it will also deals the triple damage frozen again. So you can see here, if you take these two, your rotation will be the easiest one in the game. But if you want to have the most efficient, I would say efficient game style, play with Ebon Bolt. And if you want to top it really 100% but also make it harder, play with Glacial Spike. But it's up to you how much you want to, you can say, compete with yourself. If you want to play with Ring of Frost, oh, sorry, not Ring of Frost, Ebon Bolt and Glacial Spike, you probably deal more damage, but it's also a lot of harder to play. So which risk do you want to take? Yeah. So I think this sums pretty much up the damage rotation of a Frost Mage. I mean, I don't think I have to tell you about, you have a sheep ability where you can also sheep trash mobs, you have an ice block where you can survive yourself if you're dying. You pretty much know that. But now you know the hard part about being Frost Mage is actually knowing about the rotation, how to play it. That is the hardest part. And trust me, a lot of Frost Mages out there, they don't know they should do this. They don't know they have to use Brain Freeze or Flurry before Glacial Spike or Ebon Bolt or before Frostbolt. They just think, oh, my Flurry is now glowing, I just have to use it. That is probably also okay, but it's not efficient or good. You should always use it after a cast time spell. So the cast time spell that is flowing, there's a reason for why Frost Mage's spells are flowing slow against the target. And not just like Fire Mages where it's just like poof, poof, poof. But again, I think this pretty much sums up the Frost Mage. So I do hope you enjoy this little video. It's probably quite long now because Frost Mages takes a long time to explain with different talents. But I hope you appreciate this video. Leave down a like if you like the video, and leave down a comment if you have any questions, or if you think I said anything wrong, or if you just want to comment on any of the things I said. But again, leave down a comment, let me know what you think. So appreciate you all watching this movie, and well, thanks to all the support from you guys. Without you, I wouldn't make all these guides. It's very motivating me when I can see someone actually asking for a guide for a different class or spec. But again, thanks so much everyone for the support, really appreciate it. Hope you like this video, and well, see you in the next video. Cheers.